You know Mary and Joseph, the shepherds, and Jesus. The wise men, the donkey, the cattle, and sheep, says. But do you recall the most infamous innkeeper of all? Rough to be that guy. The innkeeper, the Pontius Pilate of the Christmas story, the one who had the nerve, the gall, the chutzpah to turn Mary away like the Mary, a woman who was clearly in labor, the man who was so bone-headed that he made Jesus the Son of God, the Messiah, the King of Kings, the Prince of Peace, the Lord of Lords, Jesus, be born in a barn. Literally, you're a mean one. Oh, we know that guy. The guy everybody loves to hate. He makes the pageant every year. He's the one with a heart 2 sizes too small who looks down his nose at Mary and Joseph and points them to the stink, stank, stunk of the stable. It's quite a picture. Enough to make us a little angry, to get our righteous indignation riled up, to make us want to throw a little shade. But before we take to Twitter, we should probably acknowledge the one tiny detail, one slight issue that comes up if we want to show our contempt for the innkeeper in the story, and that is, of course, that there's not actually an innkeeper in the story. In fact, the inn itself is only mentioned once in a tiny little sentence, half a sentence really, from Luke, because there was no place for them in the inn. Which, to be fair, it was Christmas. Gotta book early. Because there was no place for them in the inn. Doesn't say why, or even if Mary and Joseph tried and were turned away. For all we know, they could have seen the no occupancy sign outside and just decided to crash out back. Or the inn could have been filled with other pregnant women also giving birth at that moment. The point is, we don't know. We don't know. And yet that doesn't stop us from condemning the innkeeper. As with so much in our lives, as with so much in our world right now, we rarely let facts stand in the way of our indignation. We know all we need to know about someone based solely on how they look or how they speak or how they voted. And once we've made our mind up about that person, there's no turning back. Thank you, next. Why let a little truth stand in the way of our conviction? But as a people of faith, friends, the truth matters. Left or right, right or wrong, we have a responsibility to the truth. It's easy to forget in this world, but we don't have the luxury of ignoring facts, of building walls, of locking ourselves behind some locked in. No, we who proclaim the name of Christ, who proclaim the way of love, we who proclaim the way and the truth and the life, know that where we find truth, wherever we find truth, we find God. But we also know that sometimes the truth takes a search. And so tonight, like those shepherds following a star, we search for the truth of Christmas. As we do each year, we listen again to that old story for a new truth, trusting that it is as that child whose birth we celebrate tonight told us, that the truth will set us free. We begin, though, with an admonition. The truth is, one of those truths is that we could spend the rest of our lives searching for all the details of that holy night, for the size of the inn, for the maximum occupancy, for the thread count of those bands of cloth, and never find ourselves closer to the truth than we are right now. There were no pictures, no cameras, no live streaming. Hello out there. There was no first-hand account. Even Luke himself, the only one who tells this story, was writing 40 or 50 years after Jesus died, which is 70 or 80 years after he was born. In other words, he didn't know. Neither do we. And in this world of pics or it didn't happen, it can leave us a little lost. But for all of the uncertainty, friends, we can hold on to this one truth. However it happened, whenever it happened, wherever it happened, Jesus arrived. That light which shines in the darkness that no darkness can overwhelm. Jesus arrived, and the world has never been the same. And maybe, just maybe, by listening for the truth in that old story, we might find something new. Consider the circumstances. A young, poor, Jewish couple under foreign occupation is forced by decree to leave their hometown right in the very last stages of their pregnancy. They travel all across the country, hoping, praying like we all would, to find some place to rest, to find some place to take them in, to find a little comfort along the journey of life, only to find themselves giving birth in a stable and laying their firstborn child, their newborn child, in a trough, a manger, the place where animals eat. Can you hear the truth of the story? Here's one. Jesus was poor. He wasn't born into privilege. His parents had no clout or voice. They weren't welcome into some place, the good old boys network. They didn't know people, know Jesus, like so many children in our world. Like most children, it turns out, in Rochester, was born into poverty. You see, we have this tendency to think of the stable as this exception to the rule. We look at the circumstances of his birth and we think, wow, born in a stable, but the truth is children around our world are born in similar circumstances each and every day. We need only look to our own southern border, to the pregnant women there who are forced into camps because there is no place for them in the inn. It doesn't take a lot of mental gymnastics to picture ourselves standing there in the muck with Mary and Joseph, looking in on the people in comfort. As we know from our own lives, the space between the haves and the have-nots is rarely very far. Think of the difference one digit in a zip code makes in our own community. Of course, it's not always like we picture it. We hear inn and our mind immediately goes to the old lodge where Danny Kaye and Bing Crosby get the gang together to cheer up the old general. But the truth is, the Translation is more likely a dwelling place, a simple place, some place where people stay. But either way, it makes sense to us, doesn't it? We know what it's like to stand on the outside and look in, from the moms group we can't seem to break into to that middle school lunch table. We know what it's like to feel left out. You're not a mom, Stephen. We know what it's like to want nothing more than to be included, to belong, to be a part of the group, only to find ourselves out of the inn. Maybe some of us are there tonight, on the outside looking in. Of course, if we're honest, we also know what the other side is like too. Many of us know what it's like to be in the inn. Sure, we don't always like to admit it, but we know what it's like to leave someone out, to see somebody in need and turn the other way, to find a place for ourselves but not save one for someone else, not just at the Christmas Eve service. In other words, maybe we need to hear that part of the story too. Maybe in order to get at the truth, we can't just stand in the stable with Mary and Joseph and picture what it would have been like for them. Maybe we also need to stand smack dab in the middle of that inn with the closed door and to ask ourselves, what would it take for me to open it? Because make no mistake, friends, there are people out there longing to get in. Not just in the pews next to us, but in the streets around us. There are people in this world who are longing to be included, who are longing for something true, who are longing for something that we have to offer. A lesson that that child born in a manger grew up to teach us. The lesson that there is always hope. Do you hear? No matter how dark, how dank, how dreary this world seems, there is always hope. That light which shines in the darkness that no darkness can overwhelm. The hope of Christmas, friends, is that what is not what has to be. What is not what has to be. That's the hope of Christmas, but in order to make it true, we'll take each and every one of us living like it's true. Which means that whether we find ourselves in the inn or on the outs tonight, we have work to do. There are no villains in this story, no innkeepers for us to sneer. There are no villains or heroes, just fellow sojourners along the path of life, also searching for the truth. Looking, as we all do, for their place in the inn. Maybe, friends, it's time to make room. May it be so. Amen.